Good afternoon. This is Dr. Romero Salinas at Lincoln University, Extension State Specialist. This is the winter certification. We thank you, North Central SER, for granting this initiative. And today, together with Dr. Mohanacharya, also Extension State Specialist, we have our key speaker. Is the last talk, but it's the most important. And it's talking about numbers, about how to make money, and how reproduction is so important also in the farms. So we saw during the webinars a lot of things about physiology and anatomy and many things about reproduction. But now Jennifer will be bringing a very cool information about how to make money or what to avoid to be losing money. So, so welcome, Jennifer. You want to tell the people a little bit about you before start sharing your screen, please?
Sure. So I'm Jennifer Lutes, and I'm an ag business specialist with the University of Missouri Extension. I've been with Extension almost 10 years now. That's kind of hard to believe, Homero. And one of my passions is the sheep and goat economics and figuring all of the things out for the financials. I've raised sheep and goats both, and the whole reason I got into the economics of looking at the sheep and goats from a work perspective is because I learned firsthand how hard it was to find information for sheep and goats. And so I learned for myself and applied it to my own farm, and then got into a position where I could teach others about it. And that's been very, very great things. That's done great things. People generally receive it very well. So.
Okay, thank you. Yeah. Go ahead with your presentation, please.
All right, here we go. All right, so some of these slides, you guys, if you were in the first session, you got to see a few of these slides, a little bit of a teaser of what was to come. But I hope today I can kind of demystify the economics surrounding fertility. And we're going to call reproduction and fertility kind of interchangeably. But we're going to look at how reproduction really shapes the profitability in our small ruminant operations. So first and foremost, economics is not magic. We play with numbers, but we don't work magic on numbers. We try not to make things up too much, and we try to use real world examples in our economics. And as we go through here, if you have any questions, feel free to put them in the chat, and hopefully we have some time at the end and we'll get to them. But I do have to say that reproduction is really what determines how much you have to sell on your farm, and honestly, the income side of the profit equation, right? So profit is income minus expenses is our profit, right? So this really drives the income part of the equation. And what's really cool is when we increase our fertility, we don't really have to add acreage. We don't really have to have fencing. We don't really mess with the cost side a whole lot. A little bit, yes, but not a whole lot. So what we really do when we increase fertility is we increase the revenue side of the equation. And so one of the neat things about how this works is that we don't add a lot of cost to it. And we do add some variable cost to it. Sometimes we'll have some feed, vaccinations for our lambs, so on and so forth, that as we have more lambs or more kids, those costs go up, but our fixed costs don't change. And so that helps actually lower our fixed cost on a per head basis when we think about the fixed cost of our user does. The other thing I will say is that not all fertility investments pay on every farm. Some farms have more room in their cost side to increase their costs without losing money, and some farms don't. And that really depends on what markets they're playing in, and whether or not they have, they're selling into auctions, or if they're selling to show stock or genetic stock or breeding stock or different things like that. So some farms have more room than others. in their cost equations. And you've seen this one before too, and not or. This is starting to become my motto of this year. I like to think in ands and not ors. Oftentimes when we are giving this or that, that's kind of a false question, because oftentimes there's a third or fourth or fifth option. And so I like to think in ands. So strong fertility really comes from all these systems working together. You know, nutrition, health, genetics, management, reproduction, economics, all of it has to work together and fit together and be right to equal success. And so if somebody comes along and says, I can give you this mineral and it'll fix all your problems, well, it's probably not going to fix all your problems if you're not paying attention to the genetics or health or other pieces of the equation. And so we have to keep in mind that all of those things have to be tied together and tied together well. And then I got to really thinking about this. So a lot of the farmers I work with really think about having more breeding animals, right? And that's the answer to their profit questions. But I don't know that that necessarily is. Sometimes we have room on the farm to add more dams, whether that's ewes or does or, cows or horses, or doesn't matter what it is, right? But I think that if we refine our focus, instead of adding more dams, maybe our focus needs to be having more dams bred, or having more weaned offspring from each of our dams, right? And I think if we can do those things, that is increasing fertility and increasing the reproductibility of our animals. And I think that is going to be more likely to hit our target than just increasing our breeding ewes or does on our farms. And so this is another concept that I really like, the manager's toolbox, right? We have all of these tools in our toolbox that we can use to manage our farms. Some of those high impact tools, monitoring for body condition score, managing nutrition, monitoring herd health, managing parasites, keeping good genetics on the farm, recognizing who those genetics are through records and observations and things like that. Maybe using the tool of culling to get rid of animals that are no longer improving our farm. Making that breeding season plan. When do we breed? Those are all very high impact tools that we have in our toolbox and we can learn to manage. The other important piece is, knowing when to market, knowing what the market looks like and where we're going to market, and having that all figured out. Technology. Whether that's adding some fence, some collars and some GPS fences, that's some neat technology. But if we don't have a strong foundation on those high impact pieces, then these other pieces of technology aren't going to be super useful to the farm if we don't have the foundation strong enough to support these technologies. That also goes for our reproductive technologies, whether that's AI or embryo transfers or any of those pieces. If we don't have that strong foundation, the technologies can hurt our farms more than it can help our farms. So I really want to kind of focus on that breeding season planning. Most of you guys all should know that our sheep and goats are seasonal short day breeders. I just kind of wanted to point out really what this means in our calendar here on north of the equator. Our longest day of the year is our summer solstice that happens June 20th or 21st, depending on kind of the calendar. And our shortest day of the year is our winter solstice, or December 21st or 22nd, right? So those are our two big things to really think about when we think about our short day breeders. And so their natural breeding season is typically September through March. Or if you want to look at it, the fall equinox through the spring equinox, right? That tends to be our short day window. If we think about their off-breeding season, just for kind of clarification for this presentation, I'm going to say it's April to August. We can argue on exactly which months or days these fall in, but that's a general thing I want to keep in for this presentation. And so if we think about their natural breeding season, we typically have higher pregnancy rates and higher birth rates, so that's more twins or triplets, right? If we breed during their natural breeding season. And reproductive enhancements or AI, embryo transfers, using some of the hormone enhancements, right? Those tend to be the easiest to do during their natural breeding season because we're enhancing their natural breeding season. Our off breeding season, we typically have lower pregnancy rates and lower birth rates. And I say typically because we have individuals in every breed that will breed out a season and will breed consistently out a season. But generally speaking, in sheep and goats, we do have some breeds that'll do that as well. But generally speaking, in sheep and goats, if we're breeding out of season, then we typically have lower pregnancy rates and birth rates. And so our reproductive enhancements might be most valuable during this season if we can get more animals to breed. That will enable us to have more offspring and might enable us to hit some higher markets. And we'll get into those market charts here pretty soon. I do have a couple different examples, right? So if we're going to breed during their natural breeding season, but we're going to breed early, let's just kind of throw some numbers here so you can follow what I'm doing in the charts here in a minute. And so let's say that we start breeding in August. That puts our lambing and kidding in January. And if we are marketing at weaning and we're weaning at 90 days, then we've got marketing happening around April. Let's say a mid-season natural breeding season would be breeding in January, lambing in June, and weaning and marketing in September. And then maybe a late breeding season, breeding there in March, lambing and kidding in April, weaning and marketing in November. And so before I show you any of these graphs, I kind of want to set the stage a little bit. So if we look at our kids, so this is goats specifically at 90 days, let's say they have an average body weight or birth weight, of 7 pounds, an average daily gain of half a pound a day, and a rough 90-day average weight of 52 pounds, okay? And so if I show you this seasonal price index, kind of what you're looking here is what happens to average prices for every month of the year across a 5-year span of 2021 to 2025. So what I did is I took all the Januaries from those 5 years and averaged them together, and then kind of set them to an index. So what that means is 1 is the average price for the year. Anytime this blue line is above 1, that means the price was above average, the average annual price for the year. Anytime the blue line is below, means the price received during those months was below the average annual price for the year. And so, an average is just kind of the middle, right? So what these means is January, producers could expect to receive about 5% above the average annual price. In 2025, the average annual price was $386.76. And so producers could have expected to receive in January of 2025, $4.06 a pound on average, right? And so if we throw on our early, mid, and late breeding that we just kind of went through, and remember we were marketing in April, September, or November, we can see that early marketing period hits in some of our higher prices of the year, which is not too bad for our goats. So if we had bred in that early natural breeding season, we could expect to receive about 15% above the average annual price for the year, or roughly $4.44 a pound. If we went to that mid-market season or mid-breeding season, we would see we'd be marketing, if we marketed a weaning, we would market in September, which is roughly about 12% below our average annual price for the year. And then again, that late marketing period in November, we were getting pretty close to our average annual price. We were down probably 2.5% below the average annual price for the year. So if we look at lambs the same way, lambs are a little different. I've got a little heavier birth weight average on them of 8 pounds. Average daily gain of 2/3 a pound a day, or 0.66 pounds if you like decimals better, and a 90-day average weaning weight of 67 pounds. Okay, so this kind of keeps track of more like a hair sheep than a wool sheep. Wool sheep will be a little heavier than these numbers. put their seasonal price index up, you can already see that it looks different than our goats, right? And so we've got higher prices from about November all the way through roughly April. We're selling above the average annual price. And then May through October, we're below the average annual price. So you can see that none of our natural breeding dates really hit market highs in our sheep or our goats, right? So our goats, our actual market high was back here in March. We were marketing as early as April. And in our sheep, our market high is generally January. And the closest we probably got was maybe November if we marketed it in later November. One other thing I want to note is that sheep prices tend to be a little less than on average than goat prices. So our 2025 average annual price was $2.90 a pound on our sheep. So if we go back to the kids and we want to hit this March marketing window, because that is when our seasonal price highs happen, something that we would have to do is we would have to breed in July, which is pretty well out of our natural breeding season, and kid in December in order to wean and market in March, right? Now, there are lots of other ways to get to marketing. We could have babies in January, keep them all year, and then market in March. But we will not be marketing in this 50 to 60 pound window, right? Those would probably be 80 pound kids that we're marketing. And if we market anything over a year old, then we tend to take a slide on that because the market no longer counts them as kids. But there are other options to marketing and breeding. You do not necessarily have to market at weaning. Looking at the lambs, if we want to market in January, then we would have to be breeding in May and lambing in October. And that's a little challenging too, to get those lambs bred or those ewes bred in May, because we're creeping up on that summer solstice pretty good. And remember, they're short day breeders, and we're coming up on the longest day of the year in June. But again, you could have any sort of lambing dates anywhere in here and hold those lambs longer than weaning to hit a January market. Again, this index may not look exactly alike because this is 60 to 90 pound lambs. And so if we've got heavier lambs, then we may be looking at slightly different markets on those lambs. So if we're marketing at weaning and we're trying to utilize that natural breeding season, economically, we generally have more animals to sell, but we generally market them at lower prices. If we're looking at off-season breeding and we're marketing at weaning, we generally have less animals to sell, but higher market prices. And telling you which one is better really depends on your numbers and your farm. But I do want to say there's always that third option of keeping them past weaning and trying to hold them over for a higher market at heavier weights. And Homero, I am ready for question number 1.
Okay, let me go. Question number 1. You want to read?
Sure. So please select all of the true statements. There's only one best breeding and marketing schedule for all farms. November through April are all good months to sell lambs. January through May are all good months to sell kids. And there are many breeding and marketing schedules to fit different farms. Can they select more than one on this, Homero?
I'm not sure. I'm sorry
Uh-oh.
if yeah, probably. Yeah. Do you want for me to try to change it?
No, that's okay. That's all right.
Probably they have only one option.
Yep. So pick your best option.
Yeah. Yeah. In the feedback, please. An explanation.
All right. Are we ready to end it?
Yes.
Okay, so you guys all predominantly picked D, that there are many breeding and marketing schedules to fit different farms, which is true. I will say B and C are also both true. The only one I would say that is not true is that there is a one size fits all, because that is absolutely not true, right? So A is the only one that is not true. There is no one size fits all for every farm. And if somebody tries to tell you that, well, they haven't met enough farms to know where that is no longer true at. So November through April are all good months to sell lambs. I say that's true because those are all above the average annual price. January through May are all good months to sell kids because, again, those are all months that are above the average annual price. And so if you're selling above the average annual price, I feel like you're doing pretty good, even if you don't hit the highest month out of the year to market your animals. All right, let's keep going. We're going to shift now to a little bit about breeding rates and how they affect the farm financials. And I will say that I used our extension sheep planning budget and meat goat planning budget to put this analysis together for you guys. And so to keep us all on the same page, I did run a 50 dam herd or flock. And what that means, so I've got either 50 ewes or 50 does, right? I did 100%, 170% kidding or lambing rate for each of these. And the only thing I changed was the breeding rate. And so what that means, essentially, the breeding rate is how many of our dams were bred. And so if 100% of our dams were bred and we had 50 dams in the herd, that means that 50 were bred, right? If only 90% of our dams were bred, then 5 of our dams did not get bred. And so we're going to look at how this affects profitability when some of our breeding animals did not get bred for the season. So we'll start with the doe herd, okay? And what you're looking at here is all these orange ones are our total cash costs. This is saying all 50 does were bred, all the way down to 40 does, right? So up to 10 does not getting bred. So our cost, our cash cost is in orange and our profits are in green. And what really stands out here to me is that our costs don't substantially change with the number of does that get bred. Because if our does don't get bred and we don't sell them off the farm, which was the assumption in this, that we went ahead and kept them, then we're still feeding that animal for the year. But what is different is that animal is not bringing in revenue, and so they're not generating a profit to the farm. They're actually generating a loss to the farm. And so this 50 was our 100% breeding rate. If we kind of look here at 45 does, this is that 90% breeding rate. We've lost $1,600 worth of profit by missing 5 does not being bred out of 50. And if we go down here to an 80% breeding rate, we've lost over $3,000 in profit if we miss 10 does not being bred in the season. If we look at the ewe flock, so this is now our sheep, and same thing kind of applies, right? Our costs don't change very much on these groups. What really changes over time is our profitability. And so at our 90% breeding rate, we've lost about $1,900 worth of profit in our ewes, and our 80% breeding rate, a little over $3,000 of lost profit in our breeding ewes. So shifting gears a little bit, we're going to look at now weaning rates. And so for this, I'm going to assume still that 50 dam herd or flock, right? So 50 ewes or does. 100% breeding rate, meaning we're going to make sure everybody is bred, nobody's going to be left open. And now what I'm going to change is the weaning rate, or how many offspring were weaned. And I have a little bit of a picture here to kind of give you an idea of what I talk about. So for those that you may not be familiar with 100% weaning rates or 170% weaning rates or 200% weaning rates, this might give you a little bit better idea of kind of a visual of how that looks. So 100% weaning rate, if we have 50 ewes or does, then we've got 50 single lambs, right? Or we had one that didn't give birth and one had twins. But for simplicity, let's say everybody lambed, we have 50 lambs. If we have 150% weaning rate and everybody lambed, we've now got 25 single lambs and 50 sets of twins for a total of 75 lambs. And yes, I know triplets throw a kink into this. I did not throw triplets into this. For simplicity's sake, I just used twins and singles, okay? So if we assume a 200% weaning rate, that means we didn't have any singles and 100 twins, or 50 sets of twins. And so I didn't throw triplets in here, one, because triplets aren't super reliable, and excuse me just a minute. Triplets aren't super reliable. We don't have them as consistently as we can have twins. And so it kind of muddies the water and makes things a lot more challenging to model for you guys. But just know, if we have a single set of triplets, then these numbers all change just a little bit. Okay, so on our 50 doe herd, so looking at the goats, and we've got our weaning rate along the bottom there, right? So 100% weaning rate or a 200% weaning rate on all the way across. What we're looking at here is total pounds that we have available to sell in the herd. And what I think is interesting when we look at this is that if we have 100%, we're looking at 3,500 pounds. At 200%, we have 6,000 pounds to sell. And that's only 71% increase in our weight. So we double our weaning rate, but we actually don't double the pounds sold. And that's because twins are typically lighter at sale than singles. And this takes account, what I'm about to show you takes that into account when we're selling our animals, okay? Our 50 ewe flock is about the same. It is slightly different just because they have a little bit different growth rates than our does do, than our kids do. So looking at the profitability, on this one, we've got revenue and cost. And so if you look at where revenue and cost are roughly equal, this is our break-even weaning rate that we need. So we need 100 on our goats. We need roughly about 130% weaning rate in order to break even between revenue and cost, right? But what's interesting is while our costs go up, our costs do not go up at the same rate as our revenue goes up, which means profitability goes up. Anywhere that we have a gap between revenue and cost is what we have for profit. And so at a 200% weaning rate, we've increased our revenue by 60%, but we've only increased our cost by about 11% on our goats. Another way to look at this would be a break-even price per pound. And so at 100% weaning rate, in order to break even and cover all of our costs that we had for this herd, we would need to sell all of our kids and sell them at a minimum of $4.85 a pound. At our 130% weaning rate, which was our break even between our revenue and our costs, we need to sell those kids at $4.14 a pound. And at our 200% weaning rate, in order to break even, that's not to make a profit, but just to break even, we only need to sell those kids at $3.17 a pound. And so there's more than $1 difference between our 200% weaning rate and our 100% weaning rate. And that's pretty significant if we can lower our costs enough to justify lower price per pounds, or conversely, make more profit. So if we shift gears back to the sheep, okay, again, we see the same thing. Our costs go up, but not very much, and our revenue goes up. One interesting thing about the sheep is that our break even on our sheep is sitting at roughly 170% weaning rate. And that is because in this model, remember, we were sitting at that average annual price, and the average annual price for sheep is about $1 less a pound than it is for goats. So we need a higher weaning rate in our sheep to break even. And again, if we look between our 200% weaning rate and our 100% weaning rate, we increased our revenue by 82% and only increased our cost by about 11%. If we add in, oh my gosh, I don't know what happened to that slide. It lost all its stuff. Anyways, our break even per pound, that's kind of weird. We're looking at 469 on the 100%, the 170%, we're looking at 337, and this drops down. I believe it was about 320 was the break even rate on that. I don't know what happened to that slide. Okay, question number 2, Homero.
Okay, let's go to question number 2.
Does doubling our weaning rate also double our pounds sold and revenue? True or false? All right, so Homero's sharing the results, and most of you got it. The answer is no. Doubling our weaning rate, the number of babies that we have, does not also double our pounds sold. And that's because twins usually weigh less than singles, and so it's not a one-for-one comparison, which I thought was pretty interesting, and I kind of tripped myself out about it, and I'm like, why didn't this double? And I had to really stop and think about why the math didn't math the way I thought it was going to. And it doesn't necessarily double our revenue because we've got lighter animals that we're selling. And market prices do not always reward lighter animals equally. And so it would be nice if it did, but it does not always double. Okay, we will keep trucking along here and get that to clear. So back to what the whole thing has been about, this whole winter conference, adding reproductive enhancements. You know, I don't want to get in the weeds and say that AI is going to make or break a farm, or that adding seeders is going to make or break a farm, because farms all have different cost structures, right? But the general rule of thumb is that anything we do to add reproductive enhancements must cost less than it brings in, right? It must have a profit. So we have to remember that even though we double the weaning rate, we don't double revenue. And the reason I give you that reminder here is because if you're sitting down and trying to pencil this out and you're saying seeders cost X, but they're going to get me 10 more kids, we can't equate those 10 extra kids to what we already had if we were having singles, right? If they were twins, because twins are generally lighter than singles, and they do generally grow slower than singles do. But I would say that adding a repro cost could increase our break-even weaning rate. It could increase our break-even dollars per pound, right? And what I mean by that, I guess I should say lower those. It could lower our break-even weaning rate. So we needed 170% in our sheep. Nope, I've confused myself. That's crazy. It's Monday, guys. I apologize. Anyways, adding reproduction costs could increase our break-even weaning rate, meaning that if we add costs and we don't add revenue to cover those costs, then that 170% that we needed in our sheep could bump up to 175 or 180% in order to break even on the cost. So essentially, profitable fertility, has to equal the value of one more has to be greater than the cost of one more. And I really kind of wanted to show you these charts because we think of a profit per doe, but we don't always think of a profit per doe based on the weaning rate. So these are our goats profit per doe based on all of the numbers that we've talked about previously. And so at 130%, in a 50 doe herd, our does are only making us $2.36 worth of profit to the farm. after covering all of their costs. And so as we improve our weaning rate, our profitability also improves, right? So if we can push it up here to 180% weaning rate, now we're looking at a profitability of about $80 a doe, which is getting much better returns on the farm than our break even at a roughly 230. Our sheep look significantly different because remember, we didn't approach that break even until about 170%. And at that point we were profitable on that farm, and our ewes were only bringing in about 380 per ewe profit to the farm. And this is on that 50 ewe herd. As we improved though, our profitability on those animals also improved. And remember, it's and, not or, right? We can't have these or thinkings and be successful. It's reproductive and economics. Can we add AI and do lots of really cool things with reproductive assistance? Absolutely. But if we don't incorporate the economics in it, then we may lose our butts on the farm, and that's not okay. It's genetics and management, it's nutrition and health, and it's really all of these together. So as I think about how I would make generalized recommendations out of these things, I would say that prioritizing production practices that contribute to successful reproduction needs to be first and foremost in our mind, including managing our grazing, right? Managing our body condition score, making sure every dam is bred. It's not just about the AI or the embryo transfers or the seeders or those pieces. Getting the foundation right first will ensure that when we add those pieces, they work how we want them to add. I would also consider culling dams that are not being bred at all, one. And if they're not weaning twins and you've got room in your herd to make room for more ewes or does coming up, I would consider culling dams that are not weaning twins. And then I would really stop and evaluate any reproductive failures that we have. Who really is at fault? Is it the dam or is it management? I think back to my herd, and when I was doing sheep, I always had a couple that would get ketosis, get ketotic towards the end of their pregnancy. And as I stopped and evaluated the herd, I looked across the herd and looking at body condition scores and who's having trouble. Well, the ones that were having trouble were who I considered my easy keepers, right? They were the ones that never really lost body condition, were probably over body conditioned at breeding, were over body conditioned during pregnancy, stayed over body condition pretty much all year long. But it wasn't the whole herd that was happening to. And so from that perspective, I had one of two options. I could separate these one or two ewes out of the herd and manage them differently, or I could plumb pull them out of the herd and send them on their way, right? Whether that's to another farm that manages differently than I do, or to auction to be sold as meat, right? And so I think about who's at fault. If the whole herd is having trouble, then that's a management issue. If there's one or two out of the herd that's having trouble, then that's a dam issue. And we really need to start thinking about culling those individuals that don't meet our management standards. There are some exceptions. Just like I said, there is no one size fits all. And so there are always exceptions to every rule. I will say some exceptions to these generalized priorities and rules that I've kind of talked about in here would be your higher value markets. So you may have animals that justify additional costs because you may have markets that give you room to have those additional costs and still have profits. And those, I kind of think about our show world. I think about our breeding stock or our genetics breeding stock, right? Our genetic stock that we sell to other producers. There's always room in certain high value markets to have additional cost and to justify additional reproductive costs. Maybe you've got some high biosecurity standards that you can't bring in a buck or a ram from another farm, right? Because of those high biosecurity standards, Generally, we're selling into high value markets, and that also may justify having higher costs and being profitable at the same time. Or maybe you've got a really superior animal on your farm that you are wanting to create multiple replacements from and bring those replacements into your herd to improve your overall production on the farm. And so saving those high quality genetics may justify, one or two time kind of higher cost to really improve your herd going forward for years to come. There are always exceptions that we can think of in order to justify higher costs. But regardless, the cost of your repo strategy really should be less than the additional income from your repo strategy. Essentially, it's got to make you some money, right? It needs to at least break even, or even better, make you a profit. And in order for you to know any of those things, really, you have to know your cost of production. And so I would say that using some of our budgets, some of Oklahoma's budgets, there's a lot of different budget tools out there that are spreadsheet based that you can go plug your own numbers into to figure out your own cost of production and how adding any kind of alternative reproductive strategies might influence your cost of production and your profitability. All right, Homero, I am ready for question 3.
Okay, question 3. There we go.
All right. So what is the most important system to manage to improve fertility? Breeding season, nutrition, genetics, health, grazing, or all of the above?
Yeah, somebody is asking, what about the selling of the milk? So this is mainly for meat production systems.
It is, and I apologize. I don't play in the dairy world too much, so.
Yeah.
But it still holds, right? The economics still hold there, because if you're increasing milk production or milk quality and you can sell milk at a higher price or higher quantity, then that's really where your profitability driver is on those. And so in that instance, you're weighing all of your choices against how much your milk yield or milk price or quality could be.
Yeah, from the place where I coming from, 70% of the revenue of the total revenue for the farmers is coming from milk selling, and 30% from the kids' meat.
And there are ways to improve marketing kids, right? Crossing them with a meat buck if you don't need to retain them or things like that. But so there are other ways to improve revenue on the farm for that. But it does look like most people got it all right. So all of the above. It was kind of a trick question because all of these pieces are super important when we talk about improving fertility, right? And that's why we've covered so many different topics through this session, through this series, is because it's all important. So I think I've got just a couple more slides. There wasn't very many. Big economic message. We want to increase revenue. We want to decrease costs. Overall, we want things to be balanced, right? We can't go too far in one direction or the other. Think and, not or. So fertility really grows our revenue because we have more offspring, we have more to sell. It can improve our efficiencies by lowering our fixed costs on a per head basis. But it has to be balanced. The value of one more has to exceed the cost of to produce one more. Top 3 things that I would say everybody should do: ensure all dams are bred, improve those birthing and weaning rates. We could also talk about weaning weights, but we didn't even get into that one in here, right? And then our reproduction costs, any added costs really need to be less than the additional revenue. All right. I'm gonna stop sharing here. Hey, I've done pretty good today. 47. We got plenty of time for questions.
Yeah.
So are you ready for the question? I have listed out some of the questions.
Yes.
So you talked about the melatonin implant. Is there a melatonin that can be added to the feed?
So I didn't talk about melatonin, and you probably won't ever hear me talk too much about melatonin because it's not approved yet in our markets. And so anybody that's doing melatonin here in the United States is doing that off label. And yeah, that's going to be between you and a veterinarian and not me
So,
as a third party.
yeah, thank you. So the next couple of questions will be for Dr. Salinas. There are some people who are not the winners. So do you have a book list for the non-winners that you can email the list of books?
Sure, I will send to everybody. Yeah. I'm
Sure.
probably I'm probably for those ones that were no winners to see how many finished the certificates. We can send a prize. I don't know if everyone because there were a lot of people. But yeah, we can. Yeah, yeah.
Okay, so
Will send in
for,
the list. Yeah. What is the another?
yeah, so for the non-winners, I will repeat what Dr. Salina just said. So for the non-winners, we will see if we can still send you the book if you complete the certificate. If you watch all the 11 videos, 12 videos, then there are chances that we will send the books for you as well.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm
Uh,
sorry for those ones that got the 12. Okay, the 12
sure, sure,
classes.
sure.
Okay.
Um, so when can they submit question and answer to get the certificate? What is the deadline?
Um, I think we are going to be open probably till April. Yeah, for those people that they want to do, because as I was telling before starting the program today, um, I will be sharing also through the Facebook page that I have every week one of the talks. So for the people that they want to go and to be watched the videos and to be answering, we are going to have open like the certification in that way also. But they are losing, I mean, they are losing this interaction and I can see how the people are interacting through the chat one to another. That is so cool because also the idea from North Central SARE is to get a networking. So it's a network about farmers. So our next step is to be doing that. Even I had to do some workshops in the North Central SARE, some of the states of the North of the United States. So for this year and following years, so if you are interested in Kansas, in Nebraska, in Iowa, in Illinois, Michigan, Montana, all the North states. So we are going to have some interesting workshops that we can have those workshops in your farms. And so it's inviting some speakers from your state so we can do that. We have the budget to do that. Yeah, and give some fee for you for allowing us to use your farm.
So I will ask you the last question and then I will come to Jennifer. We are done with all the classes. How can we confirm to get the credit for all of them?
Yeah, I don't have an assistant, so I'm sorry if I have been a little bit delaying to answer. I will, for those ones that they had to go like for 3 or more classes because you couldn't attend, I will send the email, you lost these classes. Probably for those ones that they didn't attend for more than 4 classes, I will not send it. I don't want for them to feel bad receiving an email from me saying, hey, you just came for 2 or 3 classes. So in the way that I will telling them what classes they missed so that they go to the YouTube playlist and just to select and to send me an answer. This morning, I received an email with a person sending me the answers of the 11 classes so far. So I say, okay, cool, but I need some time to review all of them, okay? This person said I couldn't any, but I was watching all these webinars and hear my answers. So send me like an attachment with the answers.
Jennifer, sorry, I will come back to you. Thank you, Dr. Salnaz. How close is San Angelo's market trend compared with northern markets? How close are they, the data?
So I haven't looked at the very dollar differences, but I will say that San Angelo is the single largest market in the country, and they tend to set the prices for the country. And so I'm in Southwest Missouri. I'm still quite a ways from the San Angelo market. And I will say that our regional goat markets here, sheep markets here, fall within 10 cents of San Angelo consistently. So there is a little bit of a price difference, but that price difference tends to follow the same pattern.
Sure. Thank you. Another question is, do we have access to your budget program? Do you?
Absolutely. I was just kind of pulling that up actually. So if you do a Google for MU extension budgets, you can see we have our crop and livestock enterprise budgets. Sheep and goat budgets are definitely not the only ones we have here. We update these every year. If I click on over to livestock and poultry, you can see we've got beef, dairy cow. Sorry, there's no dairy goats yet. Sheep and goat, swine, poultry, and some other livestock. You can either go to the guide sheet that is just a sheet of the inputs that we put in, or you can actually go to these spreadsheets and modify your own.
Thank you. Do you have a price rate for 9 to 10 month old dairy buck in March or April? So it's a dairy buck during the March or April.
I don't, unfortunately.
Yeah.
I tend to play in the meat world. I could pull that up for you, or you could pull that up for yourself too. I don't know. I think you might have been in a different part. But you can look in San Angelo, Texas, through the USDA Ag Marketing Service. They do a market report every couple of weeks for San Angelo, and you can pull that marketing report and do a spot check on any of those. And a dairy buck, a 9 to 10 month old dairy buckling is probably going to be a selection 3. And so depending on the weight of that animal, it'll be that weight in the selection 3 is what you'd be looking for.
There is one more question, but before I really enjoyed your talk, Jennifer. Some of the slides, they are new for me, very informative.
Thank you.
Another question is, welcome. Can you email the link? You already did that. Can you email the link for the budget spreadsheet? There are a few questions at the end of the chat. Do you want to go? Whatever you can cover would be great.
Say that one more time.
There are a few additional questions at the end of the chat. This is all the question I have. There are a few additional questions that you can go through the chat and feel free to answer. Thank you.
Gotcha. Holiday calendar for 2026. When the goat market goes up. Well, so that index that I showed you is pretty average that's a 5-year average. I do update that every year. The holiday calendar for 2026, you should be able to Google and find pretty easily if you're looking for the different Easters and some of the Eid holidays. Both of those would be pretty important for the goat world. And a lot of those calendars do show what the market is looking for each of those holidays also. Just trying to scroll through here.
Jennifer, do you have any word about direct market you have a lot of things about experience about butchering. So just simple advice: when is business and when is not. And I surprised with this question, but
When it's what? Say that again.
yeah, when will be business a good profit to be going to do direct marketing of meat?
So direct marketing of meat takes a lot different things, right? One of the reasons that I show these graphs in the livestock auction world is because I tend to think of that as a price floor, meaning that anything we do that is beyond direct or beyond the auction, we should be making a minimum of what we could at the auction. So if we talk about direct marketing, that becomes a whole new world. We need to not only be good at production, but we also need to be good at marketing, at talking to consumers. We're no longer talking about kids and lambs. Now we're talking about lamb chops and ground lamb, and right, we're using different words to reach different people. As far as there's always additional costs when we process animals and then sell meat. There's a lot of different regulatory worlds that we have to play in. We also may be, depending on the state that we're in, we also may be including like sales tax kind of concepts on selling meat rather than animals. So there's a lot of different pieces to get involved when we start thinking about value added and direct marketing versus live animal sales.
Okay, cool. We are going to have a book pretty soon, a booklet about processing meat. So for those ones that are interested, send me an email and we can send a copy of that book for free. And also another situation is, at least here in Missouri, for dairy goat farmers, the problem is to sell the milk. So sometimes they have to throw away because there are no buyers for milk coming from goats. And the value add products is not easy. So that is the difference to other states where they have a way to be marketing. So marketing is the answer also. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And I did see a question here. What's the hardest part about balancing the economic side of running a sheep and goat farm? It's our heart. It's definitely our heart, right? We fall in love with individual animals, and sometimes the economic side of things tells you that you should be maybe getting rid of those animals because they're not as productive. But the heart and the emotional side of things makes it really challenging to do the economical side of things, right? I can always find a reason to justify keeping an animal that I probably should have gotten rid of.
Okay. Is there any other question? So for those one interested in the book of booklet about processing, meat processing, we talk a little bit about chicken, goat, sheep, and also beef regulations and some of the processes. So send me an email, please. And Jennifer, thank you so much for your talk. And
Thank you, Marlon.
we are closing today with this talk for the winter webinar. We are preparing for the next winter, and probably we are going to have some in-person talks by the end of May at Sedalia at Goat Expo, and probably will be on genetics and nutrition related integration in the herd. So thank you so much, everybody attending this winter certification. Dr. Acharya, thank you, Jennifer, again. Great talk, and we see you soon. Just keep in touch.
Thanks, guys.